A holiday celebration suddenly turns tragic for a middle-aged couple. Despite the heroic efforts of rescue workers to free them from their car and get them to the hospital, their work was in vain. Michael Richards is pronounced dead on arrival. His wife Sandy remains in critical condition. Inspector Gary Lewis has determined that their car actually went from traveling forward at 30 miles per hour to moving backwards in a fraction of a second. Unlike the driver of the pickup truck, the Richards experienced an almost instant change of direction that produced massive internal injuries. It's what police call a fatal delta V.
All right, delta V, the change of velocity for a given crash, is really a way of rating the severity of any car crash. We know it takes place over a certain fixed period of time. What we're defining with the term delta V, or change of speed, is how bad, the magnitude of that change over that little period of time. And that really leads us to an understanding of injury. For example, a car that's moving forward at some speed and is stopped in the collision and driven backwards has not only an increased change of speed compared to one that simply stops at a crash, but also exposes the occupants to a greater potential for injury. As the change of speed increases over a short period of time, folks get hurt worse and worse.
In other words, it's not direct impact with metal or glass that does so much damage to the Richards' bodies, but rather an instantaneous change in direction. This sudden shift puts catastrophic force on the heart and other organs. Massive internal bleeding usually follows, and this leads directly to Michael Richards' death. But the driver of the pickup is not nearly as vulnerable. His higher mass and greater speed at the time of collision keep his truck moving forward. Still, a collision at that speed is almost certain to cause multiple injuries and shock. The driver's life is also in grave danger. With the search on in earnest, Lewis gets two crucial pieces of information. A witness reports seeing the driver flee from the scene just moments after the collision. Another call to police reports a confrontation with the driver himself.
Hey, I'm almost ready. What?
Look, I got in a wreck and I might have killed someone. Look, I gotta go. Get off me.
His name is Reggie Dowd, and he's not in good shape.
The co-owner of the truck made a phone call to the police and reported that her boyfriend had come to her house, taken her car pretty much by force. He threatened her.
I don't know. He was limping, though. I don't know. He just came in here. He was limping. He said he might have killed someone. He took my keys, and then he left. No.
She also told the police that he was drunk, had been drinking, and that he was high and said he smoked crack cocaine. What we have is a person who's already been involved in one wreck and killed somebody with a vehicle. Now he has another vehicle and he's back out on the road again. It's like a murderer walking away with a murder weapon. He still has the weapon, he's still in the same condition he was, and he still has the potential to kill again.
In a situation like this, it would really help to know the extent of the driver's injuries. Does he need medical attention? Will he be looking for painkillers? Can he mask his injuries when he goes to see a doctor? Let's see if we can't help out.
Thanks to the girlfriend, we know the driver's hurt. The question is, how bad? Well, we have ways of sorting that out.
A dummy with a little paint reveals what typically happens to someone in a head-on crash. The seatbelts and airbags are going to work together to protect the head and upper torso, but they do that at the expense of the lower extremities. Knees and ankles are still going to be tangled up in the underside of the dash and the steering column. Look at that ankle. An injury like that, when you make contact with the floorboard or the brake pedal, it's going to hurt. If this dummy could talk, he'd probably be asking for more than aspirin.
As police continue to search for the injured Reggie Dowd, Gary Lewis returns to his office to examine each vehicle's SDM module. A vehicle's black box. It tells investigators how a car was driven up to 5 seconds before impact. From his analysis at the scene, Gary knows the pickup was speeding at the time of the crash. He hopes the SDM will explain how it ended up in the wrong lane, taking the life of Michael Richards.
We see that this vehicle was operated at 50 at impact, but 5 seconds prior to that was going 71 miles an hour. and the driver was actually on the brakes for the entire 5 seconds prior to the crash occurring. The visibility wasn't 5 seconds down the road on this particular stretch of road. It happened around a curve. So he wasn't reacting to the other car. He was hitting the brakes to save himself. This driver's operating recklessly without any regard for anybody else's safety or his own when he's at far over the speed limit on that type of roadway.
This is a critical finding for Gary. It concludes that the driver's actions were criminal, and the data can be used as evidence in court. The local hospital, on the lookout for suspicious leg injuries, notifies police that Reggie Dowd has shown up in the emergency room. Unable to endure the searing pain in his ankle, he finally comes out of hiding to seek some relief.
We had information he was going to show up at the hospital, and I met him there. His left leg was extremely swollen. The ankle and the knee were really swollen from injuries he got in this wreck.
Over here, please. Up on the bed. Could you reveal your shoe, please?
His moods were just completely all over the board. He'd go from sad to almost crying to angry, ready to fight.
Reggie, you remember what happened?
He said that he'd been involved in the wreck, said he was driving his truck, but knew nothing else about it. Didn't remember anything else about this wreck, but admitted driving. And then decided he didn't want to say anything, and then the mood would go back to angry again. He didn't want to talk at all. Then he would almost say that he was sorry, and you'd see the tears about to start, but they never came.
Gary's in a tough spot here. He's got good physical evidence to work from. He has information from Reggie's girlfriend that suggests Reggie's condition's impaired, but she doesn't see him driving at the time of the crash. He's got injuries on Reggie. Reggie's injuries are consistent with the crash itself and the crash dynamics. But he needs something more, so we have driving dynamics. We have the data from the reconstruction and the data recorder, and that tells us more about the crash. Can relate that to the injuries, but he's looking for that one last bit of evidence to tie Reggie back to this car and this crash. Suspicion's not enough. He's going to need something more.
One of the first things I thought was fingerprints. And then I realized, well, if it is his car, his fingerprints are everywhere. And I thought DNA, because it's the latest, greatest thing, even more definitive than fingerprints. So I thought, perfect, I'll get DNA. And then I realized, well, again, being his car, his DNA is everywhere. And then it hit me, except for one thing, or one place. And that is something that only comes out and only exposes itself in a violent wreck. The airbags of the vehicle. That airbag explodes right in front of your face. Your DNA is going to be deposited on it when you hit it, whether you want it to or not. Yours and nobody else's, unless there's two people in the car and they both happen to hit that bag. That was my best shot. I got a search warrant and seized that airbag and eventually got a match with the suspect's DNA.
With all of the information finally in hand, Gary can now give a full account of what happened on a dark December night in rural Maryland. Reggie Dowd was driving his pickup truck at over 60 miles an hour on a rain-slicked country road. Losing control on a corner, he applies his brakes and drifts into oncoming traffic, colliding with a car being driven by Sandy Richards. She and her husband suffer massive internal injuries when their car is instantly stopped by the impact and then hurtled backwards. Michael Richards is pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital, but his wife Sandy miraculously survives and eventually makes a full recovery. Despite Reggie Dowd's efforts to flee the scene and deny any involvement in the wreck, Gary Lewis was able to establish that Dowd was speeding at the time of impact, that he was in the wrong lane, and that he was ultimately the cause of the crash. Dowd eludes charges of driving while intoxicated, but indisputable DNA evidence leaves him little choice but to plead guilty to manslaughter by automobile and hit and run.